For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Derek Lapp. I have lived in Niverville for almost 10 years. My wife, as she walks away from me, is just over there, Jehna. Maybe just a little bit about myself, for those of you who don't know me. I mentioned I'm here for 10 years. I got five boys, ages 9 to 25, all of which have been through the school system here in Niverville in the last number of years since we've been here. I work in the city. My wife works from home. We own a few other businesses, and Niverville is really, really important to us. I love this town. We've been here 10 years. Grew up, born and raised in the city, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. So I'm very passionate, obviously not only about the subject, as many of you might know, but also very passionate about this town and raising a family here. So the purpose of this evening is to be completely bipartisan. It really is an educational event. We really put this event together to help sort of, I guess, address some speculation and conjecture about what cannabis is and what it means to people in small communities, large communities, and legalization. My opinion is education is super important when you try to make an informed decision, and of course we all have a very important decision before all of us. So no matter what side you fall on in this issue, whether you're a yes or a no or you're still undecided, I think it's important that all of us spend time educating ourselves to make sure that when we do make that decision, we're making the best decision for ourselves and our community. So my goal for today and the purpose behind all of this is to hope that each of you walk away becoming better informed about what cannabis is and what it means to our community. I know even in just working with our speaker, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, I thought I knew a lot about the subject, but I learned quite a bit more in working with her and looking at some of the materials that we put together. So I think you're in store for a real treat in terms of the contents and eye-opening stuff. Again, do with it what you will. We're just here to provide the information, and hopefully you can take that away and make an informed decision, as I mentioned. So what to expect today? I'm not going to be up here very long. Jehna Grobety, who I'm going to sort of give you a little bit of background on that in a little bit, is going to get up to speak for about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. She's got a presentation she's going to walk you through. She's going to touch on a few questions that have been submitted previously throughout her presentation, so she won't be calling it out directly. When we first put this event together, we sort of talked about it a bit, and this really wasn't intended to be a town hall. So we weren't going to have a microphone set up where it could be sort of this lip sync battle or this rap battle back and forth with questions and stuff like that, as most town halls go. This is a very sensitive subject, and so we wanted to be careful not to control the message as much as to protect our guest speaker, who's not from this community, who came here for free, on her own accord, on her own time, on her own dime, to share this information with us, and we're very grateful for that. So here's my thought. If we can sort of manage emotion and around the subject, and things are going sort of swimmingly well, at the end, what we are able to do is we'll open it up to questions to the audience. I'll moderate just to make sure we're staying on point. But sort of all questions are open. Jehna, who I'm sure she'll tell you a little bit about her background, this is not her first rodeo. So she's been in lots of different rooms in front of lots of different people with varying opinions as it relates to cannabis and cannabis use and legalization of cannabis. So she's not fragile by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm sure if the question is in the audience, she's probably answered it before, heard it before. So we'll play that by ear a little bit. So just a little bit about Jehna before we get started. Some of this information is on the circular or the invite, but I'm just going to kind of go through it a bit. So Jehna is a cannabis educator and manager of learning and development for Delta 9 Cannabis. So if anybody spends any time in this city, they would know that Delta 9 Cannabis is a retail cannabis distributor, but they also deal in medical cannabis and help people get connected in that way. She'll maybe tell you a little bit more about what they do in that regard. But they are fairly well established and have significant presence in the city of Winnipeg. She's been speaking to diverse groups about cannabis all across our province for the last 4 years. Some of her speaking engagements, and I sort of alluded to this a little bit, include large corporations, government agencies, local businesses, small communities, police force, and emergency services, as well as healthcare providers and things of that nature. So she is well-versed, she's well-traveled, and she's very educated when it comes to this topic. She's extensively researched cannabis and is passionate about creating safe spaces to have thoughtful conversations about cannabis. I think that's really important. Often we steer away from things that we're scared of or we don't know enough about, so I applaud every one of you in the room for showing up today and spending time to learn more. So she's not afraid to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, because they're just like anything like alcohol, cannabis, or anything else that is controversial like this, there is a bad side to it, and we as adults have to be responsible when making decisions around using it and bringing it into a community like ours. As both a mother and a business professional, she understands your concerns and really wants to talk to you about them. That's why she's here today on our recording. The truth about cannabis is clear, and the information is accessible to anybody. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jehna Grobety. Please give her a warm welcome.
Hello. There we go. Hi, my name is Jehna Grobety. Thank you, Derek, for having me here and for that lovely introduction. So I am manager of learning and development for a company called Delta 9 Cannabis. And we've been a licensed producer of medical cannabis for about 5 years now. That's where we started, was on the medical side, providing cannabis to patients. I personally started off with the company as a customer care representative for the medical side. I didn't really know anything about medical cannabis. A friend of my brother's was like, oh yeah, my cannabis company that I work for is looking for, some people. Do you want a job? And I said, yeah, I'm looking for a job. So sounds great. I was a casual recreational user. Like, I knew of cannabis use. I used it before. I liked it, but that was all I knew. When I started working there, though, I got to start talking to patients. And after a couple months, I realized, especially when we were going through the hard times of building our new business and we didn't always have the supply that people needed, I got to hear a lot of stories about how this product affected people's lives, how they used it, why they used it, some of the difficulties that they had in obtaining it through the medical system, and I was fascinated. I would hear everything from people with cancer treatment, PTSD, like all these different things that I thought, how is it possible that this product, this one thing, can help with all this thing that I thought just like hippies and teenagers used. And so I started doing research, and it was really, really interesting. After about 2 years of research, he had opened a clinic, and I was the person who knew the most about cannabis use for medical patients. So they put me in charge of our clinic, and then a year later with recreational cannabis, our focus was really on educating people about cannabis and having them be able to make responsible choices. So they put me in charge of all of our cannabis education for both the company and the public. So I'm going to talk a lot about cannabis. I'm going to try and touch on as many things as I can, and hopefully you'll walk away with a better understanding of what cannabis is and why people use it. So some of the topics we'll cover: what is cannabis, a little bit about the history, medical cannabis, the black market versus the regulated market, alcohol versus cannabis, some myths and facts about the product, who are the people who are using cannabis, and what are the cannabis stores like, and some current regulations, the state of our regulated market in Canada. So, cannabis is a plant. It is a flowering plant. A lot of people are really familiar with that cannabis leaf, that iconic cannabis symbol. But surprisingly enough, it's not the leaves of the plant that are actually used. It's actually the bud, the flower of the plant. So these interesting looking plant here, those are the flowers of the cannabis plant. This is where all of the chemicals that react with our body are actually on these flowers. When you look closely at a cannabis bud, you'll notice it looks like there's covered in little crystals. So that's where all of the cannabinoids and the terpenes are. There are over 100 different cannabinoids in cannabis. The two most well-known are THC and CBD. Now, THC is the component of cannabis that gives that intoxicating feeling. It also does have medical properties as well. It can reduce inflammation, it can reduce pain. There are a lot of things that THC Our bodies are actually full of receptors on our cells that respond to the cannabinoids in cannabis. And the reason that this is because our body produces chemicals that are very similar in structure to things like THC and CBD. They react with these receptors to keep our bodies in balance, in homeostasis. So THC is very similar in structure, reacts in a similar way. Another cannabinoid that's very popular these days is called CBD. CBD is interesting because it's non-intoxicating, but it does, a lot of people say it's not psychoactive. That's not exactly accurate. It does affect our brains. It can help to reduce anxiety. It can help to reduce depression. So there are things that CBD does in our brain, but it doesn't make you feel intoxicated the way THC does. THC is the reason that people use it in the evenings and on the weekends to chill and relax or party with their friends, because it gives that very euphoric feeling. CBD doesn't have that, but it does do a lot of things in our body, and it can be very beneficial for medical issues and therapeutic issues as well. As I mentioned, there's over 100 cannabinoids in cannabis. We don't know what all of them do yet, but there is a lot more research being done since legalization has occurred to find out all the different things that this product can do. The cannabis plant is also full of terpenes. Now, terpenes are commonly found in all plants. They are the chemicals that provide plants with their signature smells and flavors. So, for example, a lemon is full of limonene. That's what gives it that citrusy smell. Limonene is also a terpene that is commonly found in cannabis. Things like linalool in lavender, pinene in pine cones. These things are all found in cannabis plants, and they all have an effect on our body. When you smell pinene and that piney scent, it can invigorate your body and it can sharpen your focus. When you smell linalool from a lavender-based lotion, it can make you feel relaxed. The terpenes are the reason that different types of cannabis can actually have different effects. We all know the typical stereotype: you smoke some weed, you sit on the couch and eat Doritos. You've got munchies and you're relaxed and you're tired. But not all cannabis is going to have that effect on you. And the reason that different types of cannabis strains have different effects has a lot to do with the terpenes that are in it. So there are estimated to be about 800 different types of cannabis strains, each with varying amounts of THC, CBD, and terpenes. And all of these different strains have slightly different effects. They're separated into 3 groups, generally classified as indica, sativas, or hybrids. The indica and sativa terms are often used to kind of give you an idea of what type of effects to expect from that particular strain. If it's an indica strain, chances are it's going to make you feel more sedated and more relaxed, whereas a sativa strain, chances are it's going to make you feel more invigorated and focused. Hybrid strains can have a really varying blend, so they could do both or one or the other. So that's just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of how complex this plant actually is. When we're looking at cannabis for medical purposes, and we look at the types of medicines that we use today, it's oftentimes something like Tylenol, which is just one chemical compound. It's very easy to do research on one chemical compound to find out how it works, what does it do in the body, how much do you need to take. With cannabis, because it is very multifaceted and complex, it's a little bit more challenging to actually be able to pinpoint exactly which strains are going to have which effects on which people, which really provides an opportunity for a lot of research to be done in the future, so we can really kind of draw out everything that we can find about this particular plant. It's particularly important for medical purposes because there are so many different things that can be treated with cannabis, and we're going to talk in more detail about that in a moment. So the history of cannabis. Now, cannabis has been in the news a lot lately, in the last 5 to 10 years, but it's been around a lot longer than that. So we have documented medical use of cannabis that goes back as far as about 4,000 years. We have archaeological evidence of people using hemp and cannabis that goes back about 10,000 years. Hemp is thought to be one of the earliest cultivated plants by humans, and it can be used for everything from its seed to its fiber. You can make cloth, you can make paper, you can make fuel. It is a very, very versatile plant. Hemp is the same as cannabis. A lot of people think there's a really big difference between hemp and cannabis. Hemp is actually just a cannabis sativa plant that has less than 0.3% THC content. The way it's grown also can affect what it's used for. For example, if you're cultivating a cannabis plant for the flower, you're going to grow it very differently than if you're cultivating it for a nice thick stem to make fiber, for example. But ultimately, hemp and cannabis are basically just different variations of the same plant. Cannabis was widely used until about 1914. It was very, very common in almost everybody's medicine cabinet was going to be some sort of tincture or preparation made with cannabis. It was used for everything from headaches, menstrual cramps, nausea, all sorts of different things. And it was interestingly enough when they started this push for prohibition of cannabis, they switched from calling it cannabis to calling it marijuana because, well, it was pretty racially motivated. They wanted most people to associate marijuana with the Mexican immigrants that were coming to the country at the time. And a lot of people who were really pushing for prohibition of marijuana were even oblivious to the fact that the cannabis preparations that they have in their medicine cabinets and that their parents had and that their grandparents had were actually the same product they were pushing to eliminate. The recreational use of cannabis kind of made a comeback in the 60s. We're all familiar with the hippies and, you know, sorry, it wasn't just the hippies. It was not just the hippies, for sure. But that was really what it came to be associated with when it came back in the 60s. And, but even today, cannabis is the most widely used drug after alcohol, which alcohol is used by about, I think it's estimated about 80% of Canadians use alcohol. It's a very, very commonly accepted drug in our society, which is very interesting to me as someone who uses cannabis and no longer uses alcohol. One thing I found is interesting is I get a lot of flack now when I go out with my friends and we have dinner and I say, no, I don't want to drink because it just makes me tired and then I'm going to have a hangover after one drink. And they get, well, you're not hangover, why aren't you drinking? And are you pregnant again? And so I never really felt peer pressure in my life until I was a 40-year-old woman who doesn't drink. And not because I have a problem with alcohol, not because I was an alcoholic, just I prefer not to. And I get a lot of blowback from that, unfortunately. So cannabis today, and the reason that we got to this point where we now legalize this substance, this really came from the medical use. It came from people finding that this was something that was helping them with ailments that maybe nothing else was helping with, and they were really pushing for access to have this medicine and have safe access to it. So in 2001, the Canadian government created the MMAR, which allowed patients to grow their own cannabis. However, it turns out growing good quality cannabis is not as easy as just growing some seeds in the ground. So in 2013, the government created the MMPR, which allowed, which I think the MMPR was the government was growing cannabis, and it turns out they're not good. So then the ACMPR was created so that licensed producers could apply to grow cannabis for medical patients, as well as people would be allowed to grow their own if they chose to do so. So these regulations finally came about in 2016, which really opened up the door for patients to be able to access quality cannabis and consistent cannabis, because that's another difficulty that patients have, is the consistency when you find something that is really working for you, and then 2 months later not be able to find more. It can be really, really hard on patients. So being able to provide them with consistent medicine is something very important. And then in 2018, the medical program was sort of absorbed by the Cannabis Act, and cannabis became legal for all adults in Canada. Some of the reasons that people choose medical cannabis, harm especially compared to a lot of things like opiates, antidepressants, a lot of medication, especially if it's something that needs to be taken on a regular basis for a long time, is really can be very harmful to your body, and a lot of people find that they have way fewer side effects and a better quality of life from using cannabis as their treatment. When you go the medical cannabis route, you have advice from a healthcare professional. So there are doctors out there who are knowledgeable about using cannabis as medicine. Not every doctor is. There are a lot of doctors out there who don't know enough about it. And there's a good reason for that. I mentioned earlier about our endocannabinoid system, our system of receptors that responds to cannabis use. This system of receptors wasn't discovered until 1992 by a scientist in Israel. So your doctor probably didn't learn anything about the endocannabinoid system in medical school, probably didn't even know it existed. About 10 years ago, someone did a study on the state of medical schools in the US to find out how many medical schools actually talk about the endocannabinoid system. Did they have a course? Did they have a program? Did they even mention it in a course? Only 13% of medical schools even mentioned the endocannabinoid system in a course. This is a system that balances all of our bodies, all of our systems. It balances our reproductive system, our digestive system, our nervous system. It has an impact on all the different functions of our body. And unfortunately, doctors aren't well educated on it yet. And this is why having this type of research be available to be done since legalization is so important, because this is something that really affects the state of our health. And doctors need to become more well educated about it in order to be able to better help their patients. Luckily, there are doctors out there who are knowledgeable. We happen to have a clinic in Winnipeg that has 3 doctors on staff who can meet with patients and help to counsel whether or not they think cannabis is a good treatment for them. We're not the only ones too. There are other clinics in Winnipeg as well that can help patients with that. So if you are thinking this might be something that you might benefit from, this is something that you're curious about, or just something that you have more questions about, there are doctors out there. I do have some flyers too for our clinic. And if your doctor isn't knowledgeable about it, we can definitely help for patients who can't talk to their own doctor about it. I do encourage people, though, to talk about their doctors with it if they are looking at medical use, for a few reasons. One, it's important for your doctor to know if you are doing any other kinds of therapies, you know, he should be aware of them. And also, even though cannabis is relatively safe medicine, and even though even CBD is recognized by the World Health Organization as being very, very safe for consumption, it can interact with other medications. So you do want to be careful about incorporating CBD or THC, whether it's for any purpose, recreational or medicinal, if you're using other medications. Just like anything else, to know how that's going to react with your medicine. The medical system also allows you to have confidence in supply, confidence in the safety of your product. The regulations that Health Canada puts licensed producers through are very, very strict to ensure that the product is safe. Some medical cannabis patients have almost no immune system. So we want to make sure that every product that gets out there is very, very safe. And it's also really important to know that recreational cannabis is regulated by the exact same rules. We already had a really high standard of quality put into place for the medical side of cannabis production. So they weren't going to change things for recreational. They were going to keep that high standard, and they have. So whether you're using the products for medical or recreational purposes, they are the same products that are regulated by the same strict set of rules for safety. The medical cannabis you can have delivered to your door, and as well you can have some tax rebates, and some private insurance companies have started to cover medical cannabis. You also have the ability to grow your own. So in Manitoba, for recreational consumers, the government of Manitoba has decided to not allow people to grow their own cannabis. But if you are a medical patient, cannabis, even on the medical side, can be quite pricey. So if you use a lot of it, it does make sense to grow your own. So that is something that is that option is available for medical patients. Some of the conditions that can be treated with medical cannabis has a lot of them. Pain management, chronic pain, fibromyalgia. A lot of the really interesting research on fibromyalgia that's coming out now suggests that fibromyalgia itself may be an endocannabinoid deficiency or disorder, which would explain why, since fibromyalgia has come along, doctors have been going, I don't know what this is. They don't know what the endocannabinoid system is. That makes sense. So a lot of the research is pointing towards that, especially considering how unsuccessful a lot of pharmaceutical medication is for fibro. Cannabis has proven to be very effective treatment for a lot of patients that have come through our clinic. Gastrointestinal conditions, nausea, Crohn's and colitis. They have been treating nausea with cannabis for many, many years. In fact, Dr. Meshulam, who discovered the endocannabinoid system and CBD, he did a study with some cancer patients, children, at a hospital in Israel. And they, of course, had separated the group of children into the placebo group and the non-placebo group. After about 2 weeks, the doctor, the head of the hospital who was in charge of the study, said they're not giving the kids the placebo anymore. They couldn't stand to see how well the one group was doing using cannabis extracts compared to the sick children who are still vomiting and can't eat anything, and they just started giving cannabis to all of the study members across the board because of the effectiveness and how well it was going for them. So these are the kind of things that we've been seeing even since the early studies of cannabis as medicine in this century. Neurological disorders like depression and anxiety, epilepsy, insomnia, MS, PTSD, full body conditions like HIV and AIDS symptoms, cancer symptoms. There's a lot of real interest in using cannabis for curing cancer. I have a lot of patients who would come into the clinic and talk about how they can treat their actual cancer with cannabis. The research really is in the beginning stages of that, but using cannabis to be able to manage symptoms of current cancer treatments has been very successful. Joint conditions like arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis can be successfully treated with cannabis, as well as vision conditions like glaucoma. That was actually one of the first ones that came up in California, I believe, when they were starting to look at medical cannabis, was for the treatment of glaucoma. So these are some of the things that people come into our clinic looking for advice on, and that our doctor has been able to help with cannabis. So we're going to talk now a little bit about the black market versus the regulated market. So according to Statistics Canada, in 2006, there was over 4 million Canadians that were using cannabis, and these are people over the age of 15. And that number increased to over 5 million right before legalization. So there is a very active black market in Canada already. It is estimated that the black market is worth about $4 billion before legalization. Of course, now with legal cannabis, we are trying to change that. It's been slow going, but it is happening. The unregulated market, some of the downfalls and some of the reasons we want to put an end to this, it does encourage creating more potent drugs. And this is something that we saw with alcohol prohibition, is that when the consequences of having a drug are based on how much of that drug you have, you're going to try and create more and more potent drugs. When you've got, you're either smuggling a case of beer, or that you can sell for maybe like $100, or a case of whiskey that's going to be the same size that you can sell for $500 because it's more potent, they went with the whiskey. Before Prohibition, spirits weren't actually super common. A lot of people drank beer or wine, but with Prohibition, people wanted the stronger stuff because they didn't want to risk the consequences just for a beer when they could get a smaller amount of a really concentrated drug. The same thing happened with cannabis. A lot of people are talking about how the cannabis that you find today is so much more potent than it was in the 60s. Absolutely it is. There's a reason for that, because people have been trying to breed the plant to have higher and higher levels of THC, because if you're going to get more jail time for 30 grams than you are for 5 grams, you're going to want to have the most potent stuff possible so that you don't have to have a lot of it with you. The downside of this, and there are several, potent cannabis is a much higher risk than less potent cannabis. And the other thing that happened that people were not aware of, when you breed a cannabis plant to have high THC, you're actually lowering the amount of CBD that's going to be found in that plant. And CBD helps to counteract the intoxicating effects of THC. High THC can often cause paranoia, anxiety, and CBD helps to prevent that from happening. But you can only have so much of both in a cannabis plant. So if you're breeding cannabis to have more and more THC, naturally the CBD is becoming less and less, and that product is becoming more dangerous. With the regulated market, we now see a real call for more balanced products, products that have higher levels of CBD. These are the kind of things that people are coming into the store looking for. Granted, there is still a market for those high THC products, but a lot of people are looking for something that's going to be more balanced, something that is going to be less risky, and those are the kind of things that now we know are out there. People didn't realize they were breeding the CBD out because you don't have any sort of psychological euphoric effect from it, so you wouldn't notice that something was being bred out when you're breeding it up for THC. But cannabis products now, you will find a lot more variety, a lot more balance for people who don't want to, who don't need a lot of THC. And a lot of people don't. The unregulated market actually makes drugs more available for youth. I know quite a few people who sell cannabis on the unregulated market, and no one's ever asked me for my ID, that's for sure. Cannabis stores are very tightly controlled. You can't even get into a cannabis store if you are under the age of majority, which is 19 for Manitoba. So the regulated market is definitely one of the safeguards that we have. A lot of people are concerned that the regulated market is going to make cannabis available to kids. Definitely not through a legal store. The other thing too is it's very unlikely that the unregulated market is going to be buying from a legal cannabis store and then selling at a profit, because the prices in cannabis stores are already pretty high. It's very highly taxed. So that's also something that doesn't really occur in the legalized markets that have come up. And this is based on a lot of research that has been done on established markets like Colorado and California. So the regulated market has a big focus on education. That is why I'm here tonight. Even though, Delta 9 is actually not one of the companies that are in the running for a cannabis store in Niverville, the educational aspect of just people knowing what this plant is and what it is about is really, really high priority for myself personally, as well as for the industry as a whole. The regulated market focuses on quality and safety of products, and it also allows for research. There just simply isn't enough research done to tell us all of the things that cannabis can do. So I wanted to kind of give a little bit of comparison. I'm not here really to smash alcohol consumption. I've stated my own opinions on the subject. But just to give a comparison, because this is an intoxicating substance similar to alcohol, just to kind of view sort of what are, how similar and how different are they. So according to druguse.com, when it comes to which of these two substances can put someone at risk for getting hurt or for hurting others, alcohol is considered to cause more harm than cannabis. In most cases, it's not life-threatening, but you can consume enough alcohol to be fatal. There are no reported cases of someone dying from THC or cannabis alone. The estimated amount of THC that you would have to have in your system to cause a fatal overdose, they've estimated it based on animal testing to be between 15 and 70 grams of THC. Not grams of cannabis, but grams of THC. That would be, if you're using 20% cannabis, which is relatively potent, something along the lines of, I think, 238 joints in one dose. And that's just to reach 15 grams of THC. The range is 15 to 70. So that would be smoked or to consume. I mean, that's quite a hefty amount of cannabis. So that's something that, and the reason it's very simple is because there aren't any actual cannabinoid receptors in the part of the brain that regulates like your heartbeat and your breathing. So while alcohol can shut those parts of your brain down, as can other drugs, cannabis does not. So overconsumption of cannabis does definitely happen. And it can happen quite easily. And it can be very unpleasant. Most of the time it happens with edible cannabis because people aren't aware that when you eat cannabis, it can take quite a long time for that cannabis to go through your system, anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. So oftentimes when people are new to cannabis and they don't know, maybe they don't know the potency of the edibles that they're having, they might take a dose and then wait 45 minutes and go, oh, this isn't working, I'm going to take another dose, and then they've consumed too much. This is one of the reasons that cannabis education is so important for me, because I didn't know that when I tried my first edible, and that's what happened to me. And it was bad. You feel nauseous, you feel dizzy, you feel anxious. Do keep in mind, if you or anyone you know is in a position where this happens, keep calm, keep hydrated, relax. It is not fatal. If you do feel like you do need to seek medical attention, by all means do. But just to know that that this is something that is kind of it's very uncomfortable and unpleasant, but it will pass. So that's something to be aware of, and that's the kind of thing that I didn't find out until I was in this industry, until I started talking to people, until I got some education on the subject. How to use cannabis is super important. When I talk to my children, and I've got 5 kids all the way from 3 up to the age of 15, and I've talked to them all about cannabis and about drugs in general, and every time they come home from school and say they talked to us about drugs, I'm like, okay, sit down. What did they tell you? What didn't they tell you? And really just make them familiar with it so that I can be confident that, when it comes to them making choices that I'm not there to oversee, and that is happening, I know that they're going to make good, well-educated choices. So another comparison from alcohol and cannabis. So alcohol playing a large role in criminal activities and violence. Excessive drinking can lower inhibitions, it can impair people's judgment, and increase the risk of aggressive behavior. 15% of people who use alcohol develop a dependency, and 6 people die from alcohol poisoning every day. 9% of people who use cannabis develop a dependency, but there has never been a report of a fatal overdose of cannabis. So that's another kind of thing. We're going to get to that in the myths and facts, which is actually next. A lot of people will say, oh, cannabis isn't addictive. I disagree. It definitely, as we just saw, the statistics show that 9% of users can develop a dependency. You can develop a dependency on just about anything, especially something that modifies your mood, which cannabis does do. However, from all reports and my own experience, cannabis dependency is not nearly as severe as alcohol as far as withdrawal symptoms. If you try to discontinue use of cannabis, withdrawing from alcohol, heroin, meth can be fatal, the withdrawal symptoms. My own experience as someone who uses cannabis fairly regularly, and at some points in my life even daily, I have only noticed the most minor discomfort. When I travel, for example, I do often travel outside of Canada, where I can access cannabis, and I notice almost no effect, despite going from daily use to no use. So while there are some withdrawal symptoms, the cannabis dependency and cannabis withdrawal is not nearly as dangerous or severe. But cannabis dependency is a real thing, and it can seriously affect your life. So we do always recommend, and there are resources out there, if you know people who do have trouble with their cannabis use, that there are resources out there to help. Some other myths. Cannabis as a gateway drug has come up a lot in the past, especially. There is no real science showing that is the case, though. There are some interesting studies showing that nicotine can actually increase the pleasure that you get from other drugs such as cocaine and heroin. So that is probably the closest they come to actually proving a drug as an actual gateway to other drugs. Some of the arguments for cannabis as a gateway drug, which are valid, if you are buying cannabis from the unregulated market and you know someone who's selling drugs illegally, chances are that person might be able to get you other harder drugs. So that does provide easier access. That is not the case if you're buying your cannabis from a regulated market. That's all you're going to be able to get. So the cannabis is a gateway drug, the science has debunked that. Another myth, cannabis is natural, so it's harmless. Cannabis is not a dangerous drug, but it's far from being harmless. There are definitely some long-term and short-term effects on your health from using cannabis. Some of the short-term effects, we've talked about the euphoria. It can cause confusion and memory lapses. It can cause, a little bit of stumbling, or it can cause some definite short-term effects on your body. Some of the longer-term effects are smoking cannabis can cause chronic lung infections, mucus buildup in the lungs and throat. However, they've long been trying to look for a link between smoking cannabis and lung cancer and have been unable to find it. However, if you do smoke tobacco and cannabis together, that will definitely increase your chance for lung cancer, more so than just smoking tobacco. So if you are a tobacco smoker, that's another thing to keep in mind. Cannabis causes cancer. As I said, that does not appear to be the case, and there are a lot of promising research that shows that it may do actually do the opposite. So we're really, really excited about looking at that type of research. And prohibition protects youth from the harms of drug use. Prohibition of any kind has long been shown to be ineffective at swaying young people's decisions, whether we're talking about drugs, alcohol, sex, those things. Just say no does not work. Young people, at the very least, they need to be informed. Having a product that they know is not available to them, they're going to ask why, and they're going to open up that conversation for information, for education, to learn what are the risks. And then that way they can make smart decisions. We underestimate, I think, the ability of our children and our teenagers, especially our teenagers and young adults, to make good decisions. When they're well informed, they will do so. So some well-known cannabis users. Who uses cannabis? A lot of people, actually. Some really successful people like Morgan Freeman, Michael Phelps, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Michael Bloomberg, and Richard Branson have all been quite open about their cannabis use. So there are a lot of people out there, successful people, who use this, whether it's medical purposes, recreational purposes, whether it's once in a while or every day. There are a lot of people who have very full, active, productive lives and are very successful, who use cannabis on a daily basis. I don't like to toot my own horn, but I'd like to think that I'm one of them. As I mentioned, I've got a really great job. I'm really happy and successful at what I do. I have a very full life, kids, partner. Life is great, and cannabis is a big part of it. So whether it's just as a little part of your life, something you do once a month, or if it's a daily part of your life, people from all walks of life can be cannabis users. And I found it very interesting when I started in this industry, because I have lots of people come up to me and they'd be like telling me about, or asking me questions and telling me about, they tried this and they tried that, and they say to me, you're the only person I can talk to about this, because you're the only person I know who does it. And I'm thinking, okay, but I just talked to someone that you know about this exact same thing, and they said the same thing to me. You guys need to talk to each other. A lot of people are really surprised. Our VP of HR that came on last year, she was at her church and talking to a couple that she knows, a doctor and his wife. And they say, so I hear you got a new job, what are you doing now? And she's like, oh gosh, here we go. Yeah, I'm working for a cannabis company, and they start snickering. And she's like, what? And the doctor's wife tells her, well, I've been using medical cannabis for 5 years. And she's just so surprised. It's really, really eye-opening how many people know about this and how many people have found a way to incorporate it into their life. So there was actually a study done by BDS Analytics, and this is just a self-reported study that was done. Basically, they interviewed a bunch of people in Colorado, in California, in Washington, and just asked them kind of self-reporting about different aspects of their lifestyle. They were in 3 groups: the consumers, the acceptors, people who would consider cannabis use but don't currently use it, and then the rejectors, so people who say that they would never consider And this is what they found about their lives. So in California, cannabis consumers, the average annual income among California consumers was $93,800, compared to $72,800 for acceptors and $75,900 for rejectors. Cannabis consumers have more advanced degrees, so 20% of California consumers hold a master's degree. Cannabis consumers are happier people. I would agree with that one. I'm pretty happy most of the time. Nearly 5 in 10 Colorado consumers are more satisfied with their life than they were a year ago, which is compared to only 4 in 10 among the acceptors and rejectors. Cannabis consumers are more likely to have children. 64% are parents, compared to 60 and 55 for the acceptors and rejectors. And 37% of consumers have children under the age of 10. And cannabis consumers are more active and social. This is something that I found is really, really interesting because there have been a couple of studies done that show that cannabis consumers tend to have a lower BMI, so body mass index, than non-cannabis users. The reason I thought it was so interesting is because cannabis is well known to give you the munchies, and it does. So you would automatically think that, if you're consuming a substance that makes you kind of reach for the Doritos instead of the apples, that would lead to more obesity. But the studies that have been done on that show that that's actually not the case. And in Colorado, 50% of cannabis consumers exercise at least once a week, and 36 agree that they are very social people, compared to 21% of acceptors and 28% of rejectors. So just some really interesting facts about kind of what they've seen in places where they've had legal recreational cannabis for a few years now. What have been some of the impacts on that? One of the things that I wanted to mention, when I was looking into, for example, comparing cannabis versus alcohol, and one of the things that Derek had asked about was what types of crimes are related to cannabis use or alcohol use. And when you look at alcohol-related crimes, you've got, of course, impaired driving. There's also a lot of violent crime. Domestic abuse are often related to alcohol. Violence and risky behavior is really common with people who consume alcohol. The only cannabis-related crime statistics I could find, there was impaired driving, which is also an important thing to consider when you're using cannabis. It is mind-altering and impairing, so do not ever drive if you're impaired by cannabis. The only other crimes I could find were related to the growing or distribution or sale, basically black market cannabis. Cannabis-related crimes that are influenced by the use of cannabis, I was unable to find. So the regulated market, in time, will take over and eliminate the black market, and then there doesn't leave any cannabis-related crimes left. Basically, illegally growing and distributing cannabis are the only cannabis-related crimes I was able to find. So, another concern that people have about cannabis stores is that they're going to be dark, dingy, little holes in the walls with boarded over windows, because you aren't allowed to have clear windows and have to, in order to protect youth, we are, shading the windows of cannabis stores. But that doesn't mean that they have to look like dark, dingy places you never want to go. So I brought a couple of pictures. We've got the Delta 9 Cannabis store, so this is our first store in Dakota. As you can see, it's a very nice, clean-looking place, right on Dakota near St. Tom Mall. That is the inside of our store in River. So, we do try and keep it very sort of welcoming and not just sort of overwhelm you with a bunch of stuff. It's not a head shop. It's somewhere where you can go to get information and good quality cannabis products. So they are really nice stores. I don't really have a lot of pictures of some of our other stores. This is basically what you would see behind the counter. So when you walk into a cannabis store, it's not just cannabis products in jars or that are within reach of anyone. You have to actually go to the front and ask for the products you want. So it is very secure. They keep them kind of behind that locked area. As well, that far picture is our cannabis education bar. So that's where you can go look at the different strains, smell them, talk about them, see them, and there are specialists there who can answer, any questions you have about what type of effects, what type of products that you want for different situations. So So that's a bit what the cannabis store looks like. I did include a couple of pictures of some other cannabis stores. As I said, Delta 9 is not one of the companies that are running for a store in Niverville, so I don't really know what a store in Niverville might look like. But these are some of the other stores that you can find. That's the interior of the Meta cannabis store. So most of the stores that you'll see, the recreational stores, are kept very sort of, I don't want to say clinical, but just something that's inviting to a majority of people. Surprisingly enough, we found that the biggest demographic of people who come into our stores are over the age of 50. So that was something that we were not expecting. But yeah, there's definitely a large group of really interesting, curious people who either have never used the product or haven't used it maybe since they were in their teens and 20s and are interested in going back and trying again. So that was something that we were really surprised about and I found really interesting. Is the number of people going with really great questions. And I always encourage people, if you do go to a cannabis store, and I don't want to toot the horn of Delta 9, but I have heard many, many times that our staff is some of the best educated staff in the city, which I take all the credit for that. But definitely, if you do have questions about cannabis, anything that I can't answer tonight, or maybe that come to you in the future, definitely check out one of our stores. Try and talk to Bob; he's fantastic. And definitely, please come in and just take a look and see what it's like, because most people find it a very welcoming place. We did notice we do have a lot of staff at our stores who used to work for the liquor marts. And I remember a couple of months in, I was talking to Scott, who used to manage a liquor store, and he said it was absolutely amazing to deal with cannabis consumers compared to alcohol consumers. He would often have people come in and they'd be looking for specific product. He said, no, we just got that in, we still have to unbox it and like put stickers on it and stuff. So, could you wait like half an hour, 45 minutes? And they'd always be like, yeah, sure, no problem. He's like, oh my God, in liquor stores, people would be losing their minds if you told them to wait. And he'll have people sit there for an hour in our nice little lounge area and just sit there and wait, patient. He said he can't believe it. Like, it's just such a different environment. Cannabis consumers are just different people, I guess. So I do want to talk a little bit about the current rules and regulations, just so you are aware of them. So you can only legally purchase cannabis from a cannabis retailer. You might be able to find some, especially hemp-derived CBD products in some other stores. Be cautious of those products if they're not actually from a licensed retailer. There's very little regulation on those types of products. So the biggest problem you're going to find with those types of products, they might not be what the label says they are. Oftentimes with CBD products from an unregulated market, there will be ingredients in there that aren't listed on the label. I know some CBD products that were marketed for sleep, turns out they have melatonin in them and cough medicine in them. So you want to be always certain that you're purchasing your cannabis products from a regulated source. You must be 19 or older in Manitoba to consume cannabis. If you have family coming in from Alberta where the age is 18, make sure they know you have to be 19 here. You cannot smoke or vape cannabis in public. With the new extracts and edibles regulations that are coming out, I believe that also goes to edible products as well, cannot be consumed in public. I'm not really sure how they plan on actually executing that. I don't think that the police are going to be going up to people's picnics and poking around through their treats and brownies, but that is the law as it stands. Cannabis consumption in public is not allowed. You cannot grow cannabis in Manitoba unless you are a medical patient. And you can carry up to 30 grams of cannabis in public. There is no limit on the amount of cannabis that you have in your home, but in public you can only have up to 30 grams. If you are a medical patient, you can have up to 30 days of your prescribed daily amount. So as a medical patient, your doctor will prescribe, for example, 1 gram a day, which is 30 grams a month, so that wouldn't change. But if your doctor prescribed you 2 grams a day, you would be able to carry up to 60 grams. And that becomes important when we are traveling. Traveling with cannabis in Canada, you can travel within Canada with your cannabis on a plane, on a train, on a bus, taxi. Doesn't matter as long as you're within your possession limit, so 30 grams or 30 days of your prescription. If you leave Canada, you cannot take your cannabis with you. Even if you're going, say if you're flying to Colorado, because of the legal landscape in the States, cannabis, even though it has been legalized in certain states, is still illegal federally. So crossing any borders, crossing into the country with it, even crossing from Colorado to another state that is legal, those things are all illegal. So you will not be able to bring even your prescribed medical cannabis. If you've got a medical document from a doctor, you're going to have to leave your medicine at home, unfortunately. Yeah, no, exactly. I don't think there's any country where you can legally bring cannabis into it from anywhere else. And even coming back into Canada, you cannot bring cannabis back into Canada from Colorado or anywhere else. So definitely be aware of that. There was recently an issue where a flight from, I don't remember where it was from, but it was going to Vancouver and ended up having to be rerouted to Seattle because of weather. Line up at the bathroom, get rid of your stash. Yeah, unfortunately that is the case. So yeah, and it's a very serious offense in a lot of countries, so you do really want to be cautious. Some people ask me about, if I'm traveling, do I keep it in my carry-on or do I keep it in my luggage? After hearing about this story about being rerouted, keep it in your carry-on so you can dispose of it if you need to. Some guidelines for responsible use, of course, adults only, no driving impaired. This one is one that has caused there's been a lot of controversy about impaired driving with cannabis because we don't have the technology right now to test for, well, that's not entirely true. We do have the technology to be able to test for THC in your system, but there is a lot of controversy over how much THC should be allowed and whether a per se limit on THC for impaired driving is a practical course of action. So driving impaired by cannabis, everybody has really varying tolerances to cannabis. And this is not based on your size or your gender or your age. I know two girls, very close friends of mine. One of them can be intoxicated for hours just by being in the same room as me if I'm smoking cannabis. She doesn't have to touch it. And she's actually become intoxicated by a CBD oil that had less than 1% of THC in it. I have another friend who, because of a genetic disorder, she can consume up to 500 milligrams of THC in an edible, which is a lot. Even myself, as a regular cannabis user, I don't like to go over 10. She can consume 500 milligrams and just be like, yeah, it was all right. So that's how varying it can be. So one of the things that we always encourage everyone on the recreational market is, if you're new to cannabis, start low, increase very slowly. Because you don't know. You don't know if you're going to be that person who has a really low tolerance. You don't know if you're going to be that person who has a really high tolerance. It's really hard to gauge. So on that note, set and setting, so what types of cannabis products you're using, where you're using them, how you're using them, is important. You don't want to do like a big dab and get like a super high dose of THC and get ripped out of your mind right before you go to work. You just don't. So always consider where you're using your cannabis, what kind of cannabis you're using, why you're using it. Resist abuse. So as you mentioned, cannabis can have effects on your life, and if your use of cannabis is impacting your life in a negative way, definitely seek help. And respect the rights of others. So not everybody is a cannabis user, just like not everybody uses alcohol. It is a responsible user basically doesn't infringe their use onto others. Don't blow smoke in your friends' faces, basically. And be respectful of other people's space and public privacy. And that is all I